I'm Davina Rooney, the CEO of the Green Building Council of Australia. Our role is to partner with industry to transform towards sustainability within the built environment. When we consider circular economy, there's many definitions, but at the Green Building Council of Australia, we really like to use the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's principles. So a lot of that's about how do we reduce waste and pollution, how do we actually take materials and use them at their highest form, and then really fundamentally, how do we regenerate nature and natural systems. When we look at the way that Australia's been using products, it's been very linear. We've actually been taking things, taking them out of the ground, using them in products, and then disposing of them. Circularity gives a whole opportunity to take things through a whole cycle and actually increase the value chain of products as we go through them, use them to the highest use. The other critical need is at that time we have an opportunity to regenerate nature and undo some of the damage that's been done. This is the critical decade for the environment, particularly as we look at climate change. When we look at the global sustainability megatrends, carbon, circularity, health and well-being, they're all entwined. So the key link when we actually look at carbon is linking embodied carbon and natural systems lead to regeneration in biodiversity. So there's a really intrinsic link when we look at carbon and we actually look at circularity. So for example, when you take a product and you upcycle it to its highest use, you're actually often saving huge amount of energy, redigging core materials out of the earth, processing and transporting them. So it's always on a case-by-case basis. It's circularity, so it's complex, but there's enormous opportunities to bring these strategies together to deliver better outcomes. When we look at sustainability, we're actually in the critical decade. So we need buildings to be heading for net zero in operation by 2030. And we actually need to be 40% down on embodied carbon. Now we need to do that if we're going to hit our global goals and take the whole planet to net zero before 2050. Or looking at some of the latest IPCC reports, we're going to actually need to be bringing that trajectory forward. When we look at property and the building industry in Australia, it's considered to be quite progressive. Now, how do we measure that? We look at Australia and we note that globally we rank number one in the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, GRESB, and have since inception. We note that property's been number one on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And this is not across all sectors in Australia, so this is an area where we're more progressive. The opportunity is to take that across all of the value chain in property, work with our customers, tenants, partners, and drive that further, and actually work really hard in the hard to abate sectors, materials and circularity, and drive the same opportunities that we've seen in net zero operation in carbon, take those across products and circularity. Within Australia, it's historically been the banking sector and property that have been recognised at high levels historically by groups like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for leadership. However, this is always in a state of flux, whether it's looking at governance challenges in the financial industry, or property is going to have its own moment of reckoning of how do we electrify buildings and how do we actually decarbonise hard to abate sectors like the material sector. So it's always a process that's in flux. When we look at the building industry, it's full of opportunities and challenges. So the opportunities is we have some of the leading global players who are incredibly engaged here. So we have market leaders, whether it is Dexus, who's been doing some leading work, has committed to net zero across their whole portfolio before 2030. We have other market leaders, whether we look at the Barangaroo, we have globally leading projects. When we look at the challenges, property is hard. It's very complex to work on a project and actually work through your builders, subcontractor, supplier to drive a transition of circularity all the way across our complex and slightly fragmented industry. However, that's where we need to work together to make that an opportunity. We're very excited to see, first of all, Australia sign up for Net Zero 2050 and then the increase in carbon targets that we've seen recently with the government. There's an enormous opportunity to work together at a higher level of strategy within circular economy that's going to take the whole of Australia's economy coming together to drive this transition, and we look forward to working with the government on that opportunity. So when we look at Australia, I mean, we've got to consider this within the context that we used to be rated very low on carbon policy. So when we look at circularity, Europe is definitely ahead of us. The leading examples we see out of Amsterdam. When we look at property leaders pushing really hard on net zero, we have leaders at the forefront, so it's a real balance. What we need to do is take the leadership we've seen from a few and actually scale that into government policy and regulation. So whether that's lifting the construction code or looking to implement net zero in government operations or bring circularity into procurement processes, there's a real opportunity in Australia to take best practice and to scale that.